We are very better at remembering the musical patterns that go around our environment when via our sensory systems we get them into our brains. We are very better at remembering them, and at other times we just as better as to reproduce the music after just listening to it about 1 or 2 times. But that's not the thing with those monotonous things that do not have music in them or musical patterns in them. And this is the reason how. What could be the reason behind that we are so better at remembering and reproducing the musical patterns? The thing might find its link to the evolution. During the evolutionary phase, those organisms who were uh, better at finding links between the things via patterns would have survived. The example for this would be that when the uh, when an organism went in the wild and it's a big organism there who'd kill it. Uh, as time went on and as the organism started to correlate the or by observation or or by kind of mutation that will lead to the sensory cue, like seeing of an element to produce chemical that would lead to the fight or flight hormones. Those organisms that had this kind of mutations started having an evolutionary advantage. They started having those organisms that had by mutation or by any other kind of thing about which I might have no information, who had much better memory cells or memories about parents. They tended to survive more, and therefore they were evolutionary more fit. For example, you could consider this situation of the pattern of the day and the foraging. So if you had to forage for food, well, like most of the early humans were foragers, they did not grow their own food. They were not agriculturists. So you had to do that during the day because our sensory systems worked very well during the day, but during the night they didn't work so much, and we were also at risk of being killed by our predators. So those organisms whose minds had better memory systems had better memory systems regarding the patterns survived because those organisms got the information that if they would go out in the night for foraging, they would die simply because of the organisms, because of the other organisms, they are predators. As this thing comes into action, as this thing is the reason why we might be so much better at understanding and reproducing and remembering in our memory the musical patterns, because the musical patterns are very similar to the patterns that existed back then. How can I prove that they are similar to the patterns? Because pattern is a kind of information, like it's information that is reproducible, and this is the reason why we might be better at remembering those musical patterns that have repeating units. Like if you have something like I will love you, I will love you, yeah, you will love me, I will love you, then it has 3 repeating patterns and 1 non-repeating pattern. By having the repeating pattern, you'll be better at understanding that, by remembering that, because the 3 thing is repeated at times, and its tones and other things might be different, but that's what makes a pattern. That's a unique pattern. Yeah, it does repeat sometimes, but there are also some patterns that do not repeat. But it's mostly seen that those patterns that do repeat, or at least it's what I'm guessing. Of course, I shouldn't guess in a scientific discussion, but I'll keep it non-scientific by putting it out and just saying that it's only my personal thoughts, because no research has been done, or maybe I don't know if any research has been done there. Yeah, it would require research to prove that the difference between remembering patterns that have repeating units and those that do not have any repeating units is profound. But if it would be the case that the difference between the remembering of repeating units or patterns, then then would just make sure why we are so better at listening to music. We rarely listen it for 1 or 2 times, and then we are able to pick it out. In other words, we are able to translate it, we are able to reproduce it, and we are also able to store it for a long period of time. Because evolutionary, that was good or better for the survival of the organism. Those organisms who are better at finding a relation, finding a pattern between some activity and some action, like for finding like the day and the foraging, or the night and death. They were better at living their life. They were, on an average, more of the organisms survived, and they were able to reproduce, and they passed on their characters to the to their descendants. Those are all the organisms. Eventually, except some organisms who were not reproductively fit, they did produce offsprings, but not all of them would survive the natural selection. Natural selection means all sets of environmental hazards, predators, prey, all kinds of diseases, all kinds of other things that might be detrimental to the life of the organism. These tend to act equally on everyone. Now, those who are better at surviving, they're better at repelling these things, are better to survive even the effects of these things, will eventually be able to survive and pass on their generation, pass on their genes, their DNA, and their characters to their successors, and these successors would tend to live on all the others who did not have that genes, who did not have that survival capability, would eventually die and get diminished from the gene pool of the organisms, of the whole species.